This is what we did over the next 14 weeks, every decision in order. If you're a CTO, CMIO, or VP of engineering at a health system, and you're watching a vendor miss deadlines on a cloud migration with PHI involved, this is the recovery pattern. The names are anonymized. The architecture is real. The timeline is real. By the end of this video, you'll know 3 things: how to triage a failed migration without violating your BAA, the 4 decisions that bought us the schedule back, and the single mistake the previous vendor made that costs almost every failed migration we see. Here's what we inherited: a 350-bed regional health system, Cerner Millennium going to a cloud-hosted Epic environment on AWS. Original timeline, 18 months. We were brought in at month 11. What was actually built, a half-finished VPC architecture in 3 AWS regions, an HL7V 2-interface engine that hadn't been load tested, a data extraction job that was failing on 12% of patient records silently, and a BAA with the previous vendor that excluded the integration layer entirely. That last one matters. We'll come back to it. The HIPAA audit was scheduled in 14 weeks. Not negotiable. The state had already issued a corrective action plan. Week 1 was triage, not engineering. Triage. We did one thing. We mapped every work stream the previous vendor had started against 3 columns. Stop, continue, rebuild. Stop meant the work was making the problem worse. Continue meant it was salvageable as is. Rebuild meant it had to be torn out and replaced. 18 work streams. 6 were stopped on day 3. 5 continued. 7 had to be rebuilt. The CTO signed off on the column assignments by end of week 1. That signature is the most important artifact of the entire engagement, because every fight from week 2 onwards traces back to it. Now the BAA gap. The previous vendor had a business associate agreement covering the AWS environment. They had a separate BAA covering the Epic site integrations. They had no BAA covering the integration layer in between, the HL7 interface engine, the FHIR translation service, the queuing infrastructure that PHI passed through in transit. That's not unusual. It's almost universal. Every migration we've rescued in the last 3 years has had this exact gap, because the EHR vendor's contract ends at their API, and the cloud vendor's contract ends at their VPC, and the integration layer in between belongs to nobody until something breaks. Then it belongs to the health system. Week 2, we drafted a unified BAA covering the integration layer. Week 3, the CTO's legal team executed it with all 3 parties. Week 4, the integration layer was inside a defensible compliance boundary for the first time since the project started. We hadn't written a line of code yet. The schedule moved forward by 3 weeks anyway, because audit risk dropped. Here's the architecture decision that bought us the most time, and this is where most rescues live or die. The previous vendor was treating the migration as a single cutover event. 18 months of build, 1 weekend of switchover, hope nothing breaks. We re-architected it as a parallel run with a routing layer, both Cerner and Epic running simultaneously for 6 weeks. A routing service in front of them that decided per transaction type which system was the source of truth for that record class. Patient demographics moved first, then encounters, then medications with a pharmacist in the loop, then orders with a SINM-IO in the loop. Allergies last because allergies are where patient safety lives, and you do not move allergies on a Friday. This pattern isn't original to us. The NIH literature on EHR transitions has documented allergy list migration failures killing patients. We just refuse to repeat them. Weeks 5 through 8 were data integrity. Remember the 12% silent failure rate on the extraction job? We didn't fix that job. We replaced it. The previous vendor's pipeline was extracting on a delta basis from Cerner Millennium without reconciling against the source row counts. So records were being silently dropped, and nobody knew because the success metric was job completed without error, not row counts match. We rebuilt the pipeline with 3 reconciliation gates: row count parity at extraction, hash parity at transformation, and field level diff at load. Every batch produced an audit artifact. Every audit artifact was time-stamped, hashed, and written to a worm storage S3 bucket. which is what HIPAA's 6-year audit log retention rule actually wants, even though most teams don't implement it that way. By week 8, we had migrated 78% of the patient population with full reconciliation. The previous vendor had migrated 30% with no reconciliation. Those numbers aren't comparable, but the audit firm understood the difference, and that mattered. Weeks 9, 10, 11 were the cutover. We did it in 3 waves, not 1 weekend. Wave 1, week 9, read-only access to Epic for the clinical informatics team. Cerner remains source of truth. The point was not to start using Epic. The point was to find every broken integration before any clinician depended on it. We found 17 broken integrations. Most of them weren't in any contract. A population health dashboard built 3 years ago against the Cerner data model. A lab interface to Quest that was hard-coded against a Cerner-specific HL7 segment. A reporting cube that fed the CFO's monthly board pack. All of these were running. None of these were anyone's contractual responsibility. This is the gap the ideas to IT analysis calls out clearly. The EHR vendor's scope ends at their API. The implementation partner's SOW ends at the same place. And the decade of custom integration sitting on top of it belongs to nobody until cutover, when it belongs to the CTO at 4 a.m. Wave 2, week 10, clinical right access for one specialty. Outpatient orthopedics, lowest acuity unit in the system. 5-day soak, 3 integration fixes pushed during the soak. Wave 3, week 11, full clinical cutover scheduled for a Tuesday morning, not a Friday night. Tuesday morning means everyone you need to fix a problem is awake, in network, and at a desk. Week 12 was the HIPAA audit. The audit firm asked for 6 categories of evidence: access controls, audit logs, encryption at rest configuration, encryption in transit configuration, BAA chain of custody, incident response runbook with executed dry run. We had all 6 on day 1 of the audit because the architecture had been generating them automatically since week 4. That's the only way audit week is calm. If you're producing audit evidence in audit week, you've already failed. You just don't know it yet. The audit firm cleared the system on day 3 of audit week, 11 days before the regulatory deadline. The corrective action plan was lifted by the state on the following Monday. Weeks 13 and 14 were handover. Full source code, all infrastructure as code, runbooks, audit evidence pipeline, the unified BAA, every architecture decision document with the named engineer who made it. The CTO's team owned the system at the end of week 14, not us. That's how every engagement we run ends. No vendor lock-in, because the vendor lock-in pattern is what got the previous team into this mess in the first place. At the start of this video, I said there was one mistake the previous vendor made that costs almost every failed migration we see. It wasn't technical, it wasn't BAA scope, it wasn't data integrity, even though those all mattered. The mistake was that the original 18-month plan had no audit checkpoints inside it. The compliance work was scheduled for the final phase. The architecture was designed for the cutover, not for the audit. So when the schedule slipped, and migration schedules always slip, there was no compliance evidence accumulated to soften the slip. Every week of delay was a week of pure regulatory risk, because nothing had been built that an auditor could look at. If you take one thing from this video, design the audit artifact pipeline before you design the migration pipeline. The audit pipeline is the migration pipeline's contract with reality. Without it, the migration is fiction until the day it isn't. We've run this rescue pattern on 6 failed migrations in the last 3 years. The 14-week sequence isn't accidental. It's the shortest defensible path through an audit on a stalled program. We've put the full sequence into a checklist, 47 items, the exact order we run it in, with the artifact each step produces. Every CTO who's running a stalled migration should have this on their desk before the next steering committee meeting. It's at the link in the description. No demo, no sales call, no gate beyond an email address. Next video, what to do when your production LLM starts hallucinating in a clinical workflow. It happens more than the vendors will tell you. We'll show you the guardrail patterns we run. This is the algorithm.